On today's Murder, She Wrote podcast, we'll be talking about the last two episodes of Season 1. I decided to combine both of them, and there's a reason why. Hello and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every single episode of the hit 80s/90s show starring 3-time Academy Award nominee and 5-time Tony Award winner Miss Angela Lansbury. Today we're going to be talking about Season 1, episodes 20 and 21. I decided to do this in one episode because Murder at the Oasis was a very confusing episode, and I could not bring myself to do it as an individual episode and then do the next one, Murder or Funeral at 50 Mile. So how I arrived at this number, 20 and 21, is that the pilot, when the show premiered, it was a movie. And when the show officially premiered, the first episode was Deadly Lady. So there are 21 episodes in Season 1. The pilot movie is just that, a movie, so you do not count it as an episode. Even though it was syndicated into episodes 1 and 2, it is not an episode. Also, if you're new to this podcast, welcome. Thank you for listening. I spoil every single aspect of the episode. Who the murderer is, who the suspects are, every twist and turn, all the way down to the tiniest little details. So if you have not seen this episode, either Murder at the Oasis or Funeral at 50 Mile, then I encourage you to go either on the Peacock app where the show is streaming for free, and these episodes will be listed as the last two of Season 1. Watch them, then come back and listen to this episode and see if we've noticed the same things. Basically, this is going to be my last episode for a while. I'm going to take a hiatus after this to recharge my batteries, but after New Year's, I will definitely be back with episodes from Season 2. And also, after I talk about these episodes, I'm going to be doing sort of a review retrospect of Season 1, what my favorite episodes were and what my least favorite episodes were. So this is going to be a long one. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as I entertain you. Let's get into this episode first. Murder at the Oasis. Air date: April 7th, 1985. I'd like to say, though, the last episode I did, Armed Response, I did not get that title. I seriously do not understand that title. For the simple fact of the matter is that she broke her ankle, so I don't know why it said Armed Response, but anyway. Okay, so I have, with Murder at the Oasis, I have no idea where this episode is set. I have no idea. I'm assuming we are in New Mexico, because at one point one of the suspects is found at the Mexican border, and then Mrs. Fletcher says it's a desert town, so I'm assuming New Mexico, but she was already there, and I don't know if she ever goes to the same location twice in a season. Well, she did go to New York twice, so maybe she's back in New Mexico. We start off during the opening credits hearing someone play the piano. We find ourselves in a mansion, and the man is playing some music on the piano, but he doesn't seem to like what he's playing. He then calls for Mickey, who's his son, and says, "I thought you were working on these arrangements." And Mickey basically says, "I did, Father. You're playing it at the wrong tempo." And he's like, "You're trying to tell me about music? Me? I've been in this business for 30 years. I know more about music than you do." And he says he starts playing it in the right tempo, and says, "Here you go." And then the man calls his friend in comic relief, Buster, to come in, and Buster's like, "I really like that. That has some bounce. You should keep that, whatever it is." And he says, "What do you know about music? You have a 10 ear." He said, "Now hurry up, go get the limo and get it ready because I have an appointment at the country club." And Buster starts acting like he's dumb and goes, "Okay, sir. I'll go get the limo." In the limo, this guy tells a funny story about how he was playing Vegas and the opening act was a stripper with a duck. When they're in the limo, they get a call from a mobster named Valentino, who apparently this guy owes money to or something. I don't know. He says he doesn't want to talk to him, and then we finally see Jessica in this episode. She is at the country club with her best friend Peggy. Apparently they went to college together and made grilled cheese on a hot plate because the cafeteria had bad food. And she asked Jessica to come out for a visit, and Jessica says that she had just sent some proofs off to her publisher and was dying to get away. So it was the perfect time. We finally find out who the man is that we got introduced to at the beginning of the episode. His name is Johnny Sheridan. He is a famous singer that has been in the business for over 30 years, and according to someone who reviewed this episode on IMDb, that the character is supposed to be modeled after Frank Sinatra, but I honestly do not see that. So Johnny comes into the country club and begins talking to people and comes and sits down at Mrs. Fletcher and Peggy's table and says, "It's such a pleasure to see you again, Jessica. It's always a pleasure to see you, Peggy, my dear." They used to be married, but they're not. They've been divorced for several years. Johnny's kind of a ladies' man and didn't really want to be tied down, but she managed to give him 2 children. The first one was Mickey, and the second one is Terry, who ends up showing up at that moment. She is meeting a date there and cannot sit with Jessica and Peggy and her father. The date happens to be a tennis player named Vic LaRossi. Vic LaRossi is someone that Johnny does not seem to like, and he immediately gets up and tells Vic to stay away from his daughter and that he's after her because he's famous, because Johnny's famous and he wants money from her. They start fighting, but Detective Sergeant Barnes, who happens to be there, breaks it up, and Johnny leaves, and Peggy tells Jessica that when Terry was 17, she eloped with some boy, and her father had the boy beat up, and the marriage annulled, so Terry and Johnny have not gotten along since then. Meanwhile, that night, Buster comes downstairs with some milk for Johnny and knocks on the door of his den, where his piano and all his solid gold records and stuff is. But he gets no response and begins alerting everyone in the house that something is wrong. Mickey hears it and goes to his sister's room to find her either about to make love to Vic or they just finished, because he has no shirt on. And the bodyguard / limo driver has to run in to and breaks the door, and they find that Johnny is dead. And this is only 14 minutes into the episode, you guys. This episode felt like, to me, like it was hastily written. Like, because we don't get to know that much about Johnny. The only thing we know about him is he's a singer. He's been in the business for 30 years. He's been on television and in movies, according to him and according to his daughter later on, which I'll get to. And he has an ex-wife named Peggy, and he has 2 children, and he has a bodyguard / limo driver and a comic relief named Buster Bailey, and that's about it. And now he's dead, and we don't know anything about him. Not one single thing. So, the next day, Peggy and Mrs. Fletcher go to the mansion. The guard waves her in and says, "Nice to see you again, Mrs. Sheridan," and they go in. She insists that Jessica help solve the crime to figure out who killed Johnny. Mrs. Fletcher is reluctant at first, saying, "I'm not a detective," and she says, and suddenly Detective Sergeant Barnes appears and says, "Well, in the newspaper they say your detective work is quite profound. You have a knack for solving crime as well as writing it, even though your novels are inaccurate." She says, "I have no intention of getting involved in..." "You think my novels are inaccurate? What are you talking about?" He says, "I'll tell you on the way to the crime scene." And he basically says, "Your killers are always more interesting than your cops. Now, killers are basically dull, but cops try their damnedest to solve these crimes." Meanwhile, Terry tracks Vic down at the country club in the men's locker room and gives him money to flee town, because he would be the obvious suspect for killing her father. And then she tells him that she was just using him to spite her father. She didn't really like him all that much and doesn't really care if he comes back. Wow. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Sergeant Barnes and Mrs. Fletcher are in the crime scene where they found Johnny's body, and he was shot execution style, which makes them think that it was from a hit from the mob. But apparently Valentino is not in that business anymore, and this is not a big, huge plot point in the episode, so I don't know why it's even brought up. So they confer that there was no sign of a break-in from the sliding glass door. There was no indication that anyone from the outside came in, that the killer has to be inside. Mrs. Fletcher notices that there is a picture missing from the wall, and the detective tells her that it was just a picture of Johnny and his children. Terry then comes back home, and Mickey demands to know where she's been, and she tells him it's none of her business. And then we cut back to the detective and Mrs. Fletcher trying to figure out who could have shot Johnny and why, when Buster suddenly burst into the room and says, "Lieutenant, Detective, I think the limo driver / bodyguard is Gus, I don't know, or Lou, I don't know, is apparently gone batshit crazy and thinks that Mickey killed his father." So Sergeant Barnes has to go out there and break up the fight, and he pushes him into the pool, and he gets out and he says, "I saw Mickey go into the den before we discovered Johnny's body." And Mickey says, "Yes, of course, I was in there. I asked him to look at my arrangements, but he said he didn't want to look at them until I was finished. And then I left and went back up to my room." Suddenly, Peggy and Terry come out, and This is when Terry decides to admit the truth. She says, Mickey did not kill our father. There was someone else here that night. Vic LaRossi was here. And Sergeant Barnes says, oh, the person that your father hated? She said, yes. But how did he get here? Well, there's a master power switch to the alarm in Daddy's bedroom, and I tripped it so that I could get him in here. And he said, do you know where we can locate this guy? And she says, well, that might be a little tricky. I gave him money to go out of town because I thought he would get in trouble, and I didn't want him to get in trouble on account of me, so I gave him money to flee the country. So she said that was stupid and I shouldn't have done it. I was just doing it to get back at Daddy, but I didn't kill him. And I don't think Vic killed him either. So Sergeant Barnes leaves to put an APB out on Vic. Meanwhile, Mrs. Fletcher goes walking Mrs. Fletcher and Peggy go back to the country club to have lunch or something, and Mrs. Fletcher puts two and two together and says, you were obviously there last night. And she said, how did you know? And how this actually comes about is Buster says that the reason why Johnny shooed Mickey away was because he was expecting a lady friend. And that lady friend happened to be his ex-wife, Peggy. They apparently made love for the first time in a long time, but there was no chance they were getting back together, and Mrs. Fletcher put two and two together because the guard let her in and recognized her almost immediately, even though she had not been there for years. Meanwhile, Mrs. Fletcher goes back to the mansion and finds Terry in the den watching one of her father's old television shows. She tells Mrs. Fletcher that the man on the screen is not her father, that she probably never knew who her real father was, and that she did not kill him, that she could not bring herself to do that. She loved him despite everything he's done, and despite the fact that he seems to be incapable of showing her love. So Buster is then seen making a phone call to Valentino. Mrs. Fletcher remembers Valentino went to college with her or something, and she goes to his house to talk to him and finds Terry there, who had the same idea, wondering if he killed her father, and he's not in the mob anymore. He has political aspirations and he's trying to be clean now, so it's not even important, and he didn't kill Johnny. He loved Johnny. He wouldn't have killed him. Or so it seems. So they find Vic at the Mexican border. His van has broken down, and they arrest him and take him to the police station. When they arrest him, he says that Terry killed her father, and she says, oh no, that's not true. Why would you say that? And he said, because you used me, and you probably killed your father. At first he doesn't want a lawyer, but Mrs. Fletcher says, go ahead and get the lawyer. You might benefit from it. So he goes and gets a lawyer, but he's free and clear. We never see him again. And Terry tells Mrs. Fletcher about the call that Buster had made. And of course, that's already been resolved, but for some reason, Buster and Mrs. Fletcher have this conversation where she asks him why he called. He said he was scared. He thought that Johnny had done it, but he wasn't sure. That Valentino had killed Johnny, but he wasn't sure. And then he said, I was trying to get the bigger picture. Mrs. Fletcher says, say that again. He said, okay, I was trying to get the bigger picture. She said, that's it. And she has an epiphany moment. She calls in the cops, and our murderer turns out to be Detective Sergeant Barnes, played by Ken Howard. Basically, he was working for Valentino. He apparently had to get some sort of tape because Johnny taped his pool games to improve his game. I really did not understand that part. And apparently, Valentino might have mentioned some things he didn't want the public to know about when he was trying to run for political ambition. So, Detective Barnes was like a crooked cop and was working for Valentino and shot Johnny execution style because Johnny would not tell him which tape had Valentino on it because apparently Valentino was at his house playing pool. And he used a silencer, and he basically gave himself away when he mentioned the picture at the beginning of the episode where she goes, "Where was that picture?" Terry apparently took it out after Johnny was killed, not before the detective arrived. So the only way he could have known what was in the picture and what was on the wall was if he was in the room before. And he takes out his gun and puts a silencer on it and is about to shoot Mrs. Fletcher when everyone in the house ends up coming in. And she says, "Did you really think that I was confronting you alone?" And she said, "Ballistics will match that bullet that was in Johnny's head to the bullet in your gun. That's standard police procedure." And that's basically her saying, "See, my books are accurate, dumbass." But this episode was hastily written. It felt so fast, and we didn't have enough time to get to know Johnny, enough to care who killed him, enough to know the children, his wife, or anyone in between, because it just felt like it was rushed. It was too fast, too quick, and I could not see myself talking about this longer than 22 minutes. So that's why I decided to combine the two episodes, and I'll get to the guest stars at the end. Alright, before we get to the second episode, let's go over the guest stars in Murder at the Oasis. Our famous singer / murder victim was played by Ed Ames. He is known for... He is still alive. He is known for Daniel Boone, The War Wagon, MacLeod, and Greatest Heroes of the Bible. His last known credit is The Marshal in 1995. He guest starred on Jake and the Fat Man, In the Heat of the Night. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He was on Kojak, MacLeod, The Ed Sullivan Show. Oh, he was a singer in real life, okay. Although he didn't do any singing in this episode. He wasn't in a lot of stuff, only 19 things. Alright. Joey Bishop played the role of the comic relief Buster Bailey. Hold on just a second, my internet is acting up. He died in 2007 at the age of 89. He is known for The Joey Bishop Show, The Delta Force, Texas Across the River, and the original Ocean's 11 with Frank Sinatra. His last known credit is Mad Dog Time. He was in 28 different things, and this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He guest starred on the original Get Smart. The Danny Thomas Show. He really wasn't in a lot of things. Shame, he was funny. The son, Mickey, was played by Joseph Bottoms, and I think he was in another episode in season 1. if I'm not mistaken. He's still alive. He's known for The Dove, Holocaust, a really great miniseries, The Black Hole, and The Net television show. His last known credit is 2014's Monster in a House. He was in Walker, Texas Ranger, Days of Our Lives, a Gunsmoke movie, the soap opera Santa Barbara, I was wrong. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. I guess I recognized him from that Holocaust miniseries that I saw in school. But yeah, this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He was really good in that miniseries. Vic was played by Joseph Calley. He's still alive. He's known for Saturday Night Fever, Suicide Kings, the soap opera Port Charles, and The Lonely Lady. His last known credit is Saturday Night Fever video game. I did not know that they made a video game of Saturday Night Fever. Had no idea. He guest starred on Baywatch, Melrose Place, Silk Stockings. This will not be his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He'll appear in a couple other ones. He also guest starred on Jack and the Fat Man, and he was also on the soap opera Santa Barbara, Freddy's Nightmares, Too Close for Comfort, Trapper John, MD. Awesome guy. Our detective slash murderer was played by Ken Howard, who is related to Ron Howard and has been in a lot of projects with him. He died in 2016 at the age of 71. He is known for Michael Carrington, Rambo, 2008 version, 1776, and J. Edgar. His last known credit is in 2015 in the movie Joy. He guest starred on 30 Rock, Blue Bloods, was on The Young and the Restless, Brothers and Sisters, awesome show. Law and Order Special Victims Unit, love that one. George Lopez, Ghost Whisperer, Crossing Jordan, The Practice, The West Wing, Melrose Place. I don't remember him being on there. Maybe I haven't seen those episodes yet. Diagnosis Murder. And this will not be his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He will be in a handful of others. Good for him. I'll look out for him so I don't, tell you what else he's in another episode. And the ex-wife of Johnny was played by Piper Laurie, who I know as the really scary religious mother in Carrie. She's still alive, and of course she's known for The Hustler, Carrie, the original Twin Peaks, and The Faculty. That's another good movie. I really liked her in that movie. She's been in 117 different things. Her latest credit is 2020 in Care Cream TV series. I have no idea what that is. Never heard of that. She guest starred in Dead Like Me, Cold Case, Law and Order SVU, Special Victims Unit, Will and Grace, Frasier, Touched by an Angel, ER, Twin Peaks, the original. She played Catherine. Madlock, The Twilight Zone. This is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. What a shame, because she's a good actress. I really liked her. I really like her. She's one of my favorites. She's just, in any role she's in, she's totally committed to it. And his daughter Terry was played, or Yeah, his daughter Terry was played by Linda Pearl. I hope I said that right. And if I'm not mistaken, she looked familiar too, so maybe she's known for a soap opera. She's known for Mighty Joe Young, Visiting Hours, The Last Days of Pompeii, and First Monday. She's still alive. Her last known credit is 2020's Clarity TV show. I don't know, never heard of that. She was in The Office, Homeland, Criminal Minds, love that show. Criminal Intent movie, Cold Case, First Monday, it was a TV series. Port Charles, that's probably what I recognized her from, was Port Charles. I thought it was The Young and the Restless, but I guess I was wrong. And she'll appear in a couple other episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Can't wait to see what she plays. And now I know. She played Madlock's daughter on Madlock. That's what I recognized her from. Alright. And that's all the guest stars for that episode. Now, the next episode, Murder at 50 Mile, air date April 21st, 1985, is probably one of the best series finales I have ever seen. There was a lot of noticeable guest stars in this. So let's get started. Oh, and there is a wonderful appearance by Mr. William Window, who will go on to play Seth Hazlitt later on in the show, playing a totally different character than Seth Hazlitt. Alright, so we start off this episode at a funeral, hence the name. The title of the episode actually, has something to do with the episode. Just like the last episode was, the Oasis was called the mansion where Johnny got killed, I guess. And this one is they're at a town called 55 in Wyoming. So it matches, which is a rarity, I guess. They're at a funeral, and we get introduced to pretty much everyone. We get introduced to Mary, who is the daughter of the man that's getting buried, Doc Wallace, Bill Calamity, Tim, his brother, Art, Mary's fiance, and Sam, another one of his friends. As the funeral's wrapping up, he was in the war, I don't know which one, probably either World War I or World War II, so he gets a salute, and they fold up the flag and they give it to Mary, and then suddenly an RV arrives, and a man named Carl Mustin gets out with his wife, Sally, played by Sheila Stevens. Basically, they're there to pay their respects, but according to Mary, Carl was never a friend of her father's. Jessica's there as well because she knew Mary's father, and she's there. Afterwards, they have a party at the house. Everyone is sitting around drinking and admiring the man. We get introduced to Sheriff Ed Potts, which happens to be the last name of the actor who plays him. I wonder if that was intentional. He acts like a real sheriff from the Old West, talking like that, and has his holster so he can draw his gun, and he tells Mrs. Fletcher, I've never actually had to draw on someone, but I'm ready, willing, and able when I get to. He's a really, really bumbling sheriff, kind of a Barney Fife type, if I'm going to be honest. Um, so the party's in full swing when Carl and his wife, Sally, come in and claim that he has inherited everything, the land and the ranch, because we find ourselves in Carter Ranch, is what it's called. And he says he's inherited everything, which makes no sense to Mary because Mary is her father's daughter, and also does not make sense to any of his friends due to the fact that he did not have a will. So it seems virtually impossible that he left everything to Carl. Carl has not even been in town this whole entire time, according to all the people in this episode. So a storm is coming up, and they have to get the horses in the barn, and Carl is boosting about the fact that this is his land now. He's going to be able to keep it, and everyone has to leave, and it's going to be his and Sally's from now on. Him and Sally get into a arm wrestling contest, and she beats him at arm wrestling, and he gives her some money. The men then go out to round up the horses and get everything settled for the incoming storm. They get the horses into the barn, and Carl goes up to shut a door, and then it's later in the day and everyone's about to have dinner. Art comes home via Jesus, a farmhand who found him stranded on the side of the road. And they have a cook named Emma. And she is setting the table with them sitting there, and everyone's about to have soup. And Jesus goes into the barn to, I guess, check on something. I'm not entirely sure what. Sorry, I had to get a drink. And he finds Carl hung in the barn. Everyone goes to look and is shocked. He has been hung in the barn. Carl is dead. The sheriff is immediately called out, and Mrs. Fletcher asks the doc if he's ever investigated a crime, and the doctor tells her no, he has not. There has not been a murder in this town in 5 years, and he's only been the sheriff for 3. So immediately Mrs. Fletcher starts taking charge of the investigation, basically stringing the sheriff in the right direction, having him ask the right questions, and also disclosing what she noticed in the crime scene. She noticed that there's a blow on the back of Carl's head and with a blunt object, and also he was hanged. So he could have died with a blow to his head, not from getting hung up, lynched as they call it in the South. So they then go back in the house. The sheriff gathers them all together, and she says, "You were just about to ask us our alibis." Mrs. Fletcher said she went to go back to sleep off some jet lag. Mary took some sleeping pills from the doctor and went to bed. And Sam, Tim, Doc, and Bill all alibi each other as helping in the barn and then coming back to the house. So they all have alibis. The only person that can't not be accommodated is Sally's alibi because she was sleeping, Mrs. Fletcher's alibi because she was sleeping, and Mary's alibi because she was sleeping. And the only other one who was not on the property at the time was Art, Mary's fiancé, who immediately is under suspicion because he wasn't there. Jesus helps him get his truck out of the mud, and Sheriff Potts decides he's the obvious murderer, that he could have faked being in that mud hole and could have killed Carl and had enough time to leave, pretend he was stuck, ordinary to have an alibi. And he takes him to the sheriff's office. It turns out that Sam is actually an attorney. And of course, Sam is played by William Window, who will go on to be Seth Hazlitt. But in this episode, he's playing Sam, and he's playing a lawyer, which I find so fascinating. And he tells Sheriff Potts, he says, he has no motive, he has no reason, and you have no evidence to suggest he was there. So you have no choice but to let him go, because they figure out that the killer is left-handed. So, Jessica goes to see the doc and runs into his secretary, Alice, who says that she's the eyes and ears of the town. There isn't nothing around here that she doesn't know. And because the sheriff got on the phone with him, and basically Carl died by hanging, not by the blunt object that was hit in his head. So she thinks that doesn't make any sense, and she wants to look at the report. Well, it turns out that Carl was there a couple of days before Mary's father died and looked at his records. And he got angry and threw him out. So Jessica goes back to the house. Carl is released from, Art is released from jail, and all seems well. Later on that night, Jessica finds a noose outside her bedroom window, and she says, I'm making someone awfully nervous. And then Mrs. Fletcher suggests that Sally and him do an arm wrestling, and she beats him, and she says that she was the arm wrestling champion in the all-girl, all-women division. So I don't know if that's a thing, but why not? And later the next day, when breakfast is being served, Sally comes in and she's all happy and in a good mood. Mary wants her gone because she doesn't like her and she doesn't understand why she's married to Carl. But as it turns out, she's not married to Carl. It was a scheme. Carl just wanted her to pretend to be his wife because he had something on the doc, Sam, Tim, and Bill. And that he was going to get all of them. And he was going to get everything he wanted in the end because of whatever it is he had on him. But she ends up leaving because she did not kill Carl. But she was trying to make it look like she was married to him. But Mrs. Fletcher noticed that her ring did not leave a line on her hand when she was arm wrestling. Meaning she hasn't been wearing it that long. So as everyone gets up to go do their respected things, the doc stays behind and he is cutting up an apple. And Jessica realizes he's left-handed. She says that the killer is both right and left-handed. There's a term for it, but I can't really pronounce it. I think it's albidet. I'm not even gonna try. Sorry. So she goes to the barn with Carl, and it turns out that we don't have just one murderer. We have 4. It was Sam, Tim, Bill, and Doc all killed Carl because years and years before Mary was born, he was a ranch hand on the property. He ended up raping Mary's mother, and Mary's mother died in childbirth. Jack, that was the name of Mary's father, raised her like he was her own because it wasn't Mary's fault with what happened. almost killed Carl all those years ago, but Jack told them not to do it. When he came back and he had put all the pieces together and realized that Mary was his child, he decided to blackmail them all into getting the land so that he could have it all, since technically Mary was his daughter. It was almost like fate was allowing them to kill him, because they hung him again, and they might have chickened out to scare him, but a bolt of thunder happened and it scared the horse. So he died from being hanged. The doc took him down, hit him with a blunt object to make it look as if that could have been the cause of death. Then they hung him back up. They agreed to go to the sheriff and tell him what happened and to go on trial. But Jessica agrees never to tell Mary the sad truth of her birth. And that's the end of the episode, and what a fantastic season 1 finale that was. That is an episode that is really freaking good. What a great way to end season 1. Oh my goodness. And let's go over the guest stars, okay? Doc was played by Noah Barely Jr. I know I did not pronounce that right, and I apologize. He died in 1994 at the age of 81. He is known for The Rockford Files, Red River, Only Angels Have Wings, and Inherit the Wind. His last known credit is a TV movie called Powers Play, but it doesn't say what he played. He guest starred on The Love Boat. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He was in a TV series called The Yellow Rose, Trapper John M.D., The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, that's a good movie, The Magical World of Disney, Magnum P.I., Fantasy Island, The Rockford Files, 8 is Enough, Doc Elliott, The Waltons, that's a good show, love that show. Lassie, Bonanza. So he had a wonderful career. He was really good in this episode. You can tell he cared a lot about Mary. Mary was played by a woman I recognized on the original Dynasty, Caitlin Beller. She is still alive. She is known for The Godfather Part 2, The Sword, and The Sorcerer. The original Dynasty is Kirby. And Movie. She is still alive, and she's still acting. She just completed a short in 2016 called Tom. She returned for Dynasty The Reunion. She will appear in another episode of Murder, She Wrote. She was in the Bronx Zoo. I don't know what that was. Like I said, the original Dynasty is Kirby. A mini-series called The Blue and the Gray. And a lot of TV movies. Barnaby Jones, The $6 Million Man, the original Hawaii Five-0, and the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. She's a good actress. Bill, one of our killers, along with, Doc, Bill was played by J.D. Cannon. He died in 2005 at the age of 83. He is known for Cold Hand Luke, McCloud, Death Wish 2, and Scorpio. His last known credit is the original Law & Order in 1991. He will appear in another episode of Murder, She Wrote before the end of his career. He was also on The Magical World of Disney, The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, BJ and the Bear, The Concord, Airport 79, The Harvey Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries, McCloud, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, everyone seemed to be on that show. The Wild Wild West, 12 O'Clock High, Alfred Hitchcock Hour. So he's been in a lot of stuff. He had a great career. Our murder victim and overall villain was played by Clude Geiler. He is still alive. He is known for The Return of the Living Dead, Feast, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I recognized him, and The Last Picture Show. He's been in 165 different things. He's still alive, and his last known credit is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was in Puppet Master 5, Walker, Texas Ranger, did some voiceover work for Beavis and Butthead. This will not be his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He'll appear in a couple others. He was in the miniseries North and South Book 2, Magnum P.I., Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. He's had quite an impressive career. Tim Carver was played by Donald Mufferfat. Oh, I said that wrong. Moffat. There we go. He died in 2018 at the age of 87. He's known for The Original Thing, Clear and Pleasant Danger, The Right Stuff, and Popeye. His last known credit is 2005's Law & Order Trial by Jury. He also guest starred on The West Wing, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Tales of the City miniseries, Columbo, LA Law. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He also guest starred on The Twilight Zone and the original Dallas, so he had quite the impressive career. He was one of our murderers who was actually nice. Mary's fiance was played by Jeff Oysterhedge. He's still alive, and I pronounced his name wrong. He is known for Knight Rider, Divergent, and Mystique of the Red Death. He's been in 30 different things. His last known credit is 2010's Taken by Force. I don't know what that is. He guest starred on Madlock, Simon and Simon, Moonlighting, and he will appear in another episode of Murder, She Wrote. T.J. Hooker, Scarecrow and Mrs. King. So he was in a lot of things, but he hasn't been in anything lately. Our sheriff was played by Cliff Potts. He's still alive. He's known for The Last Ride of the Dunton Gang, Silent Running, Sometimes a Great Notion, and Once an Eagle. Never heard of any of those things. His last known credit is The Ravine, a short, in 2016. He guest starred on Star Trek The Next Generation, Madlock. He will be in another episode of Murder, She Wrote. He guest starred on Baywatch, the original Dallas, Hotel, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Simon and Simon. So he had quite the impressive career and is still acting, I think. And Sheila Stevens, one of my favorite actresses from The Poseidon Adventure, guest starred as Sally, the fake wife. She's still alive, and she is, of course, like I said, known as The Poseidon Adventure, where she played Linda Rogo, the original Nutty Professor, The Silencers, and Say One for Me. Her last known credit is 2010 and Mega Aconda, which I guess was like in the Anaconda series, probably on Sci-Fi. She was on General Hospital, The Dukes of Hazzard, reunion movie, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman 2, Santa Barbara, Night Court, Highway to Heaven, Fantasy Island, New Heart, The Love Boat, Flamingo Road. This is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote, unfortunately. I wish she would have been in a little bit on a couple other ones. And that's it. That's all our noticeable guest stars. I'm not going to go over William Window's credits just yet because he will start appearing, I believe, possibly in the next season as Seth Hazlitt. I'm not sure. Alright guys, that was our last 2 episodes of Season 1. I can't believe I've gotten to the end of it. So overall, Season 1 has a lot of great episodes in it. And also doesn't have a lot of good episodes. Like, for instance, Deadly Lady I don't think that was a really good, solid pilot episode for Season 1, even though they had the movie as the pilot episode. And that was how you got introduced to Jessica. Deadly Lady was kind of a little rough around the edges. Birds of a Feather was interesting and featured Jeff Conway and Jeannie Francis. And, of course, that was kind of a little rough around the edges too, but it was really good. Hooray for Homicide was fantastic because it had Melissa Sue Anderson and John Saxton. It's a Dog's Life was hilarious. I love that episode because of the pure campiness and the fact that they won't do something like that today. Lovers and Other Killers was a very weird episode, especially with that one guy that is that we think is a killer, but he's not the killer, and Lois Nettleson from The Heat of the Night is the killer, and she kills someone because she loves Peter Graves' character. I mean, I think that was a weak episode of Season 1. Another weak episode, I think, was Hit Run and Homicide, with the killer station wagon hitting people. I'm sorry, there's nothing scary about a station wagon. Another weak episode was We're Off to Kill the Wizard, where it was so completely obvious who the killer was. A really good episode was Death Takes a Curtain Call, with the Russian dancers trying to flee during the show, and the jealous dancer being the murderer. That was awesome. Death Cast a Spell was very interesting because Murray Hamilton was in it, and it had to do with hypnotizing. Capital Offense, in my opinion, was sort of a weak episode due to the fact that you can't just fill a congressman's seat and just throws Jessica into the world of politics like that. I mean, it's just not... It's not very realistic. Broadway Melody, my favorite. I love Luna Lunt. I love her performance in that. I love the killer and his sympathy and his reasoning behind why he was doing this. And no actual murder actually does happen in that episode. Unless you count him shooting the mugger, which wasn't actually a mugger, but an inspiring actor. But I mean, I love that episode. It just works. And Murder to a Jazz Beat was fantastic. I loved the killer's motivation for killing the murder victim. It was just great. I love My Johnny Lies Over the Ocean because Vicki Lawrence is in it. And Leslie Nielsen as the captain. He was also in the Poseidon Adventure, so he has something in common with Sheila Stevens, who guest stars in the series finale. Paint Me a Murder was very interesting. I still would like to know where I've seen that house from because it looks so familiar. Tough Guys Don't Die, great introduction for Jerry Orsbach character, one of my all-time favorite episodes. Sudden Death was kind of a little weak because it didn't seem like Jessica would be interested in football. Footnote to Murder, also set in New York, was really good. I love the twists and turns in that one. Murder Takes the Bus, fantastic because of the guest stars, but the overall plot of it I didn't like. But I love that it feels like Psycho meets And Then There Were None. Armed Response, where she's in the hospital, was really clever how they got her there and how the murder happened away from the hospital, but yet she still solved it. And of course, Martha Ray stole that show, and I absolutely loved her in that. Murder at the Oasis is probably the weakest episode in season 1 due to the fact that it feels rushed. We don't get to know who the murder victim is or who the suspects are or anything. Everything seems to go real fast at a very fast pace. And Funeral at 50 Mile is the best season finale so far of the show. It just has such great guest stars, great characters, and the murderers aren't necessarily ruthless killers. They all did it to protect Mary, the girl Mary, and it's so beautiful. I absolutely loved it. Overall, season 1 has a few rough around the edges episodes that are straightforward and to the point, but I know that it gets better in season 2. I want to thank you guys so much for your support, and I'm going to probably continue doing this until I get to the last season, which is 12, and but I'm going to take a hiatus now until after New Year's, and after New Year's is over, I will get back into the swing of things with season 2, and I will no longer have to say how I arrived at the number because season 2 is pretty much straightforward. There was no movie before season 2 premiered, so when I say season 2 episode 1, I mean season 2 episode 1, and I can't wait to get to it. Everyone's response in watching and commenting and telling me how much you like it, I appreciate it, and I will continue this after New Year's, but I need to take a break and focus on the holidays and recharge my batteries and everything because it's hard sitting here talking for a long period of time, but I quite enjoy it. So thank you so much for listening to the Murder, She Wrote podcast. I hope that you enjoyed every episode from season 1, and you can watch, you can listen to every single episode that I have covered on my channel. I hope that you all had fun and that I entertained you during this crazy time that we're living in, and I will see you after New Year's when we will cover season 2. Happy holidays! Merry Christmas, and thank you all again in my Facebook groups, Jessica Fletcher, Murder, She Wrote, and all things Murder, She Wrote, for your support and your continuing listening and commentary and everything in between. Without you, I wouldn't have had the courage to keep going. Thank you so much, and I will see you, and Happy New Year. I will see you in 2021. Bye.